The wind howled through the barren battlefield, kicking up clouds of dust that swirled around the figures standing at the center. The sky above was dim, as though the world itself was holding its breath. At the front of a massive army, a single figure stood tall, an alien queen. Her platinum blonde hair flowed like silk behind her, and her armor, shimmering gold with intricate designs, reflected the light in a way that made her seem otherworldly. Her eyes, however, were not soft or warm. They were cold and sharp, like a predator scanning its prey. Behind her, 1,000 knights in gleaming armor stood in perfect formation. They were silent, their faces obscured behind helmets, but their presence was commanding. The queen, however, did not look at them. She was focused on something else, something different, something unexpected. In the distance, a human soldier stood alone. Unlike the army surrounding the queen, he was unarmed, unafraid. He wore simple, worn clothes that seemed out of place amidst the high-tech, golden armor of the aliens. His eyes were steady, calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. He did not kneel or bow in respect to the queen like the others did. Instead, he stood tall and met her gaze directly. The queen's eyes narrowed, scanning him. There was something about him that intrigued her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't awe. It was something entirely different. She tilted her head slightly and spoke in a voice that was both soft and deadly. "Why do you not bow, human? Do you not see who I am? Do you not understand the power I hold?" The man didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He simply smiled. It was a small, knowing smile, as though he wasn't impressed by her beauty or her power. "Why should I?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "You are just another ruler with an army of soldiers who hide behind their armor." The queen's eyes widened slightly. No one spoke to her like this. No one had ever dared. She had heard of humans, weak, fragile creatures who were easily controlled, easily crushed. Yet here he was, standing before her as if she were just another face in the crowd. His words struck her, but she didn't let it show. She stepped forward, her armor clinking softly with each movement. "You dare insult me, human?" Her voice was low, filled with a cold fury that would make any other being tremble. "I could have you executed for this insolence." The man didn't seem worried. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "You could, but you won't." For a moment, there was silence. The army behind her waited for her command, the tension thick in the air. The queen stood still, her heart racing. How could this human be so bold? He was just a soldier, nothing more. Yet he made her question herself in a way no one ever had before. "Do you not see it?" she said, her voice softer now, almost wistful. "The truth beneath my crown? The ugliness that no one dares speak of?" The man didn't answer at first. He looked at her as if studying her. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter than before. "You're not ugly," he said simply. "You're just lost." The queen was taken aback. No one had ever said anything like that to her. She was used to being praised, admired, feared. But lost, the word lingered in her mind, its meaning heavier than any weapon. For a moment, she found herself looking at him in a new light. You don't think I'm beautiful?" she asked, almost as if she was seeking validation. Her gaze was no longer fierce but searching. The man smiled again, a simple, knowing smile. "Beauty isn't just about how you look. It's about what's inside. It's about strength. And you've got that in abundance." The queen stood still, her mind racing. The world around her seemed to blur, the sounds of the army fading away. She was left alone with the weight of his words, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: uncertainty. For the first time in years, she felt vulnerable, and it scared her. The man took a step back, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't bow, but his gaze was full of respect. "I came here not to fight, but to show you the truth you've been hiding from." And with that, the battle of words began, not with weapons, but with something far more powerful: the truth. The queen stood motionless, the words of the human soldier echoing in her mind. His simple declaration that she was lost had unsettled her in ways she couldn't fully understand. She had spent centuries commanding armies, conquering worlds, and building a reputation that made her a figure of fear and awe. She had always believed that her beauty was both a weapon and a shield. To be admired, to be feared at was what kept her in control, what kept her on top. Yet here she was, shaken by a single, unassuming human who saw something in her that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. Her eyes shifted, and for the first time, she saw her soldiers not as loyal followers, but as figures who followed her out of duty, not true respect. They were there to fight for her, but not to understand her. She had built a kingdom on the idea of invincibility, on being the perfect leader, the perfect queen. But was that really who she was? Was she truly the flawless being she had always portrayed herself to be? For the first time in ages, doubt crept into her thoughts. The queen turned her gaze away from the soldier and looked out across the battlefield. The ground was littered with the remnants of wars fought, battles won and lost. The battlefield before her seemed endless, as though it mirrored her own internal struggle. She had always known what was at stake in her reign: victory, power, and dominance. But now, she wasn't sure what she was truly fighting for. Her mind drifted back to her youth, to the days when she had first been crowned. Back then, beauty had been the center of her existence. Her platinum blonde hair, her striking features, the smoothness of her skin, all had been praised by those around her. Her beauty had been the cornerstone of her rise to power. People didn't look beyond the surface. They only saw what was on the outside, and that was enough to place her on a throne, surrounded by admirers. But as the years passed, she began to realize that beauty wasn't enough. People saw her beauty, but few saw her strength. Few understood the hardships she had faced, the challenges that had shaped her into the ruler she was today. She had been trained to hide her vulnerabilities, to wear her beauty like armor. But in doing so, she had closed herself off from any real connection. She was a queen, yes, but also a woman who had spent so much time crafting an image of perfection that she forgot to look inside herself. She had created a kingdom based on power and appearance, but she had never learned to trust anyone, not even herself. Her advisors, her generals, her soldiers, all were loyal to her out of fear, not love or admiration. They feared her power, not her humanity. And that was the way it had to be, or so she had thought. But now, standing before this human soldier, she began to wonder if that was the right way. His calmness, his lack of fear, intrigued her. He wasn't awed by her beauty, nor was he intimidated by her power. In fact, it seemed as though he could see right through the layers of her facade and into something deeper. "Why don't you see me?" she asked softly, her voice more vulnerable than she had ever intended it to be. "Why don't you see the queen I am? Why do you look at me as if I am just another being, another person? Don't you understand the weight of the crown I wear?" The human soldier didn't flinch. His eyes, still calm, remained focused on her. "I see you," he said quietly. "I see the queen, the leader, the warrior. But I also see the person beneath that. I see someone who's been hiding for too long. Someone who's been trapped by the image they've created." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in her life, the queen felt herself truly listening, not as a ruler, but as a person. It was as if a veil had been lifted from her eyes. She had always thought of herself as invincible, above reproach, but now, in the presence of this man, she felt small, not weak, not insignificant, but small in the sense that she realized how much she had been hiding from herself. "Why does it matter?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why should I care about what he sees? What does it change?" The soldier stepped forward, his voice firm but gentle. "Because it's not just about power or beauty or fear. It's about being true to who you are. When you're true to yourself, when you stop hiding behind the mask of perfection, that's when you find strength. Real strength, the kind that can't be broken by anyone." The queen felt her heart pound in her chest, a mixture of fear and something else, something unfamiliar. For the first time, she felt as though she was being given the opportunity to shed the armor she had built around herself, to let go of the image she had created, to be real. But could she? Could she let go of everything that had defined her for so long? Her gaze flicked to her army, still standing at attention, their eyes fixed on her. They, too, were waiting for her to lead, to give them the command to move forward, to fight. But what if she wasn't sure of the battle anymore? What if the true battle wasn't on the battlefield, but within herself? For the first time, she wasn't sure of the answer, and that terrified her. But it also freed her in a way she had never known. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. The queen's mind raced. She had spent her entire life building an image of herself, an image that could never be broken. But now, faced with the raw honesty of this soldier, she wondered if it was time to break free, to step into something new, something more real. She wasn't sure yet, but something inside her stirred. The soldier waited patiently, his expression unreadable, yet filled with something, maybe hope, maybe understanding. And in that moment, the queen realized something profound. This human soldier had given her a gift that no one else could. The gift of seeing herself not as the queen, not as the beautiful conqueror, but as a person who had the chance to begin again. The queen stood at the edge of the battlefield, her mind in turmoil. The words of the human soldier echoed through her thoughts like an unshakable storm. For years, she had been taught that her beauty and her power were inseparable, that they were the foundation of her reign. Yet now, faced with the calm, unwavering gaze of this man, all of it seemed to crumble away. She had never been questioned like this before, never been made to feel so human. The soldiers behind her shifted restlessly, their armor clanking softly as they waited for her next command. But she did not turn to them. Her thoughts were far away, caught in the web of her own uncertainty. She had always believed she could control everything: her army, her kingdom, her destiny. But now, with one conversation, her entire world was shifting. The human soldier stood before her, his expression still calm, but his eyes, there was something in his eyes that she couldn't quite place. It wasn't fear, nor was it reverence. He looked at her as if she were just another person, not a queen, not a ruler, but a woman, a human being, vulnerable and real. The queen had never allowed herself to be seen that way. She had never allowed anyone to look at her as though she were anything less than the embodiment of perfection. And yet, here this soldier stood, looking at her as if he understood more about her than anyone else ever had. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" she finally asked, her voice trembling, though she fought to keep it steady. "What do you see when you look at me?" The soldier didn't hesitate. "I see a queen who's been hiding behind her own image for too long," he said, his voice low and calm. "I see someone who's been so focused on what the world sees that she's forgotten how to see herself." His words pierced her like a dagger. She wanted to be angry, to lash out at him for daring to speak so freely to her. But something stopped her. Deep inside, she knew he was right. She had been hiding for so long, for so many years, behind the walls of her own perfection, her own carefully crafted image. But now, in his presence, she felt herself beginning to unravel. "I don't need your pity," she snapped, her voice suddenly cold, a defense mechanism rising within her. "You don't understand. You're just a soldier, nothing more. You have no idea what it's like to bear the weight of an entire kingdom, of an entire race. You have no idea what it means to be queen." The soldier's expression softened, his gaze never leaving hers. "No, I don't understand what it means to be a queen," he said quietly. "But I understand what it means to feel trapped, to feel like you're being suffocated by the expectations of others, to feel like you have to be something you're not, just to survive." The queen's heart skipped a beat. His words hit her like a tidal wave, sweeping away everything she had built. She had always thought that her beauty, her power, had defined her. She had always thought that those were the things that made her strong. But now, standing before this man, she realized how much she had lost in the process, how much of herself she had sacrificed. "Why are you still here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why haven't you left? I've insulted you, threatened you. I'm not who you think I am." The soldier stepped forward, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm not afraid of you," he said simply. "And I'm not here because of your beauty or your power. I'm here because you're more than just the crown on your head. You're more than the armor you wear. You're more than the title you hold. And deep down, you know that." The queen felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she wasn't being judged for her beauty or her strength. For the first time, someone was seeing her for who she truly was, a person who had been hiding behind a mask of perfection for far too long. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly, unwilling to show any weakness. But the soldier saw it. He saw the crack in her armor, the vulnerability that she had spent so long hiding. "You think I'm weak," she said, almost to herself. "You think that just because I'm questioning everything, That I'm weak?" The soldier shook his head. "No," he said softly. "I think you're stronger than you know. Strength isn't about never questioning yourself. It's about having the courage to face the truth, even when it scares you. You're strong enough to face who you really are. You just have to let go of the fear of being imperfect." The queen stood in silence, the weight of his words settling on her shoulders. Could she really do it? Could she let go of the image she had spent her whole life building? Could she allow herself to be seen, truly seen, for the first time? She looked at him then, really looked at him, this human soldier who had come from nowhere, with nothing but his own quiet strength. In his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time: hope. Not for her beauty, not for her power, but for her. "Maybe I don't need to be perfect," she whispered, the words feeling strange on her tongue. "Maybe I've been hiding from the wrong things." The soldier smiled, and in that moment, the queen felt a shift. It wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't immediate, but something inside her had begun to change. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had permission to be more than just a queen, more than just a figurehead. She could be someone who had flaws, someone who could make mistakes, someone who could be human. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what that might mean. The queen stood silently, her mind swirling with emotions she had long suppressed. The world around her felt distant, as though she were floating in a strange, unfamiliar space. Her soldiers remained at attention, their eyes fixed on her, waiting for her to regain control, to give them a command. But for the first time, she couldn't give them an order. She was no longer sure of what she was commanding them for, or why. The weight of her crown felt heavier than ever, and the golden armor she wore, once a symbol of her power, now felt like a prison. The human soldier had said something that kept reverberating in her thoughts. Strength isn't about never questioning yourself. It's about having the courage to face the truth. The truth. What truth was he talking about? She had spent her life building a facade and image of perfection that no one dared challenge. Her beauty, her power, her rule, these were the things that defined her. But now, in the presence of this man, it all felt hollow. For the first time, she was forced to confront something deeper, something that terrified her. She turned her back to her army, retreating a few steps away from the soldiers, who still waited for her command. There was a strange peace in this moment, an unsettling peace. The battlefield stretched out before her, the dust and smoke hanging in the air like a fog. Her mind, too, felt clouded. She couldn't stop thinking about the soldier. He wasn't the first human she had encountered, nor the first to face her with defiance. But he was different. His unwavering calmness, his refusal to bow to her beauty, to her power, had shaken something inside her. As she stood alone, the wind rustled through the remnants of the battlefield, and the queen's gaze drifted across the horizon. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the land. It was beautiful in a way she hadn't appreciated before, as if the world itself was reminding her of what she had been too blind to see. She had spent so many years building an empire, commanding armies, conquering worlds. She had been told that she was destined for greatness, that her beauty was both a gift and a curse. But now, in this quiet moment, the questions seemed endless. What was she really fighting for? What had she sacrificed in the name of power? The soldiers who had followed her, the planets she had conquered, the titles she had claimed, none of it mattered anymore. What was left when you stripped away the armor, the crown, and the fear? A voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to reality. It was the soldier again, his voice quiet but firm. "You can keep hiding behind your armor, or you can face what's inside." The queen turned, her eyes narrowing. She couldn't understand why he kept pushing, why he wouldn't just leave her to her thoughts. But his words had a power she couldn't ignore. This human, this stranger, had seen her in a way no one else had. He had seen past the queen, past the golden armor, and into the soul of the woman beneath. And in that gaze, there was something she could no longer deny. She was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of being someone she was not. "I don't know how," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to stop being this perfect queen." The soldier stepped forward, his presence steady and reassuring. "You don't have to be perfect," he said. "You just have to be real. To yourself, to those around you." For a moment, the queen just stood there, feeling the weight of his words sink in. Could it really be that simple? Could she let go of the image she had held so tightly for so long? Could she embrace her imperfections and still be strong? "I'm scared," she said, more to herself than to him. "I don't know who I am without all of this." The soldier's expression softened, and he nodded. That's the first step, admitting it. And in that moment, the queen felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't strength, not the kind she had always relied on. It was vulnerability, but it was also freedom. The chains that had bound her for so long, the need to be perfect, to be admired, began to loosen. She looked out across the battlefield once more, but this time, she didn't see it as a place of conquest. She saw it as a place of change. The world she had built was crumbling, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time for something new. For the first time, the queen realized that the true battle wasn't against her enemies, her soldiers, or even her own doubts. It was about accepting her self-imperfections and all. And as she stood there, with the sun setting behind her and the army waiting patiently in the distance, the queen knew that her journey was just beginning. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, she felt ready to find out. The wind whispered through the empty battlefield, a soft reminder of the stillness that had settled in the wake of the queen's revelation. She stood there, staring at the ground, her mind racing, but her heart, for once, felt lighter. The weight of the crown, the expectations, and the perfect image she had spent her life building, all seemed distant now. It was a strange feeling, as if a part of her had been freed from an invisible chain that had bound her for so long. For the first time, she could feel the cracks in her armor, not just the physical armor she wore, but the walls she had built around her emotions, around her identity. She had lived so long in a world of power and perfection, and now, facing the truth that had been hidden beneath her own arrogance, she was unsure of where to go next. But one thing was clear: she could no longer hide from herself. The human soldier, who had been nothing more than a distant figure at the start of this strange encounter, now stood closer to her than anyone ever had. His presence was steady, like the calm after a storm, and his words had left an imprint on her mind. "You just have to be real," he had said, "to yourself, to those around you." But what did that mean for someone like her, a queen who had always been seen as a symbol of power and beauty, now standing on the edge of a truth she had never dared to face before? Was it even possible to be real after so many years of pretending? Her eyes slowly lifted to meet his gaze. His expression hadn't changed. There was no judgment, no pity in his eyes, just an understanding that she had never expected from anyone. He was waiting, waiting for her to take the next step, waiting for her to find her own way forward. A part of her wanted to push him away, to demand that he leave her to her thoughts. But there was another part, a part she hadn't listened to in a long time, that longed for his presence, longed for someone to finally see her, not as a queen, but as a person, as a woman who had been trapped by her own expectations and fears. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. The sound of her own breath was oddly calming. For the first time in years, she felt as though she could simply breathe. And as she exhaled, the tightness in her chest seemed to ease just a little. "I don't know how to be real," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've spent so long being the queen, the perfect ruler, that I don't know what it means to be just me." The soldier didn't speak immediately, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes: hope, maybe, or perhaps understanding. He took a small step forward, closing the distance between them. "It's not about being perfect," he said softly. "It's about being honest with yourself, about accepting who you are, even the parts you don't like, especially the parts you don't like." The queen's heart tightened at his words. She had always been so careful to keep her imperfections hidden. She had never allowed herself to be vulnerable, to be seen as anything less than the embodiment of strength. But now, standing here with this human soldier, she realized how much of herself she had kept locked away, buried beneath layers of armor and arrogance. "I've been afraid," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "Afraid of being seen as weak, afraid of showing anyone the things I hate about myself." The soldier nodded, his voice calm and reassuring. "Everyone has flaws. It's what makes us human, or, in your case, alien," he added with a small knowing smile. But that's what makes you real. The things you think are weaknesses, they're what make you stronger in the end. The more you embrace them, the less they control you. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, and for the first time, she saw the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't trying to manipulate her or change her. He was simply showing her that she didn't have to be perfect to be worthy, that the mask she had worn for so long wasn't necessary. And for a fleeting moment, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had spent too many years hiding from the truth. "I don't know if I can," she said, a mixture of fear and uncertainty creeping into her voice. "I don't know if I can let go of everything I've built." The soldier's smile softened. "You don't have to do it all at once. Take it one step at a time. Just start with one truth, one thing you've been hiding from, and face it. You'll see, the rest will follow." The queen stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of his words settle deep inside her. Could she do it? Could she really start to face the parts of herself she had spent so long running from? She took another deep breath, and this time when she exhaled, it felt like the beginning of something new, something real. "I'll try," she said quietly, the words feeling like the first step toward something that had seemed impossible. Just moments before and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. The queen stood still, her eyes fixed on the horizon as the weight of her own thoughts pressed down upon her. The battlefield stretched before her, an endless expanse of dust and scattered remnants of a world she had long sought to control. The truth that had started to unfold in her heart now seemed undeniable. She had spent so many years hiding behind a mask of strength, of beauty, of perfection. But what had that truly given her? A kingdom built on fear? An army that admired her but never truly understood her? A crown that glistened but felt heavier with each passing day? She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, as if trying to gather all the scattered pieces of herself. The wind whispered through her platinum blonde hair, now no longer something that defined her, but a part of her, fragile, human, and real. In the silence, she could hear the voices of her soldiers behind her, waiting for her to speak, to lead. But what was there left to say? What could she command them to do when she herself was still struggling to understand who she was? The human soldier had shown her something she had never allowed herself to see before. He had made her face the part of herself she had locked away for so long. But now, she wondered if it was enough. Could she really leave behind everything she had worked for? Everything that had made her the ruler she was? The thought terrified her. The idea of being vulnerable, of embracing her imperfections, felt like stepping into an unknown abyss. She turned to face the soldier again, who stood at a distance, watching her quietly, patiently. His eyes were calm, unwavering. They weren't filled with judgment, nor were they filled with admiration. They simply reflected the truth that she had been too afraid to confront. "I don't know what to do now," the queen said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I thought that being perfect, being powerful, would make me invincible. But now, I feel lost." The soldier stepped forward, his presence gentle yet firm. "Being lost doesn't mean you're broken," he said softly. "It means you're on the edge of something new, something real. You're not invincible, and that's okay. It's okay to feel uncertain, to feel human. It's part of what makes you stronger." The queen stared at him, her heart heavy with the truth in his words. For so long, she had clung to the idea of invincibility. She had thought that perfection would protect her, that her strength would shield her from doubt. But now, standing before this human who had seen through her defenses, she understood. The strength she had sought was not the kind she had always believed in. It was not about fear, or beauty, or power. It was about being honest, about accepting herself for who she was, not who she pretended to be. "I've spent so long hiding from this," she said, her voice trembling. "I've hidden behind the crown, behind the armor, behind the title. But I don't want to hide anymore." The soldier's gaze softened. "Then you don't have to carry that weight alone anymore." For the first time, the queen felt something shift within her. It wasn't a sudden realization, nor a moment of sudden clarity. It was a quiet knowing, a quiet understanding that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But it was a road she could walk. She wasn't alone, and she didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be real. She took a step forward, her eyes meeting the soldier's once more. In that moment, The weight of the crown on her head felt lighter. The armor that had once felt like a shield now felt like a choice, not a necessity. She didn't need to hide behind it any longer. "I'm ready," she said. The words filled with more conviction than she had ever felt before. "Ready to face whatever comes next," the soldier nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "You're not alone, Queen. You never were." And as she stood there, her eyes no longer focused solely on the future, but on the present, on the truth of who she was, the Queen finally felt like she could move forward, not as the perfect ruler, not as the untouchable queen, but as a woman who had faced her fears, embraced her imperfections, and was finally ready to step into the unknown. The Queen stood alone, the evening light casting long shadows across the battlefield. The world around her felt different, as though it had shifted beneath her feet. Her soldiers were still waiting, still standing in perfect formation, their eyes fixed on her. Yet she felt a distance between them, a distance not of space, but of understanding. She had been their queen, their leader, their symbol of power. But now she was something else. She was no longer the untouchable figure they had followed for so long. She was human, raw, vulnerable, and yet, in her vulnerability, she felt stronger than ever. Her mind returned to the soldier who had challenged everything she believed in, the human who had dared to look past the surface, who had seen her for what she truly was. He had given her the courage to see herself, to strip away the armor she had worn for so long. And now she was left standing at a crossroads. What came next? What did it mean to be a leader when the mask was gone, when the illusion of perfection had crumbled? The soldiers behind her shifted, their movements stiff and formal. But she no longer felt the need to turn around and command them. They had followed her because of what she had represented. But now she had to ask herself, did they follow her because of who she was, or because of the image she projected? Could they follow her still, not as the queen who commanded them, but as the woman who had stood before them, unafraid to confront her own flaws? The wind shifted, and the sound of it seemed to whisper to her, urging her to take the next step. She had spent her life commanding others, but now it was time to command herself, time to trust the truth she had uncovered, time to let go of the fear that had held her captive for so long. Turning slowly, she faced her army, her gaze sweeping over them. For the first time, she didn't see them as mere soldiers, tools of her will. She saw them as individuals, each one with their own fears, their own doubts, their own desires. They were human, just like her. And for the first time, she understood what true leadership meant. It wasn't about power or dominance. It wasn't about fear. It was about connection. It was about being real, about sharing in the journey, not just giving orders from a distance. "I've led you for so long," she said, her voice steady, but not as commanding as it once was. "But today, I ask you to follow me, not because of who I am, but because of who we are together. We are more than just soldiers. We are more than just a queen and her army. We are people, each of us, standing together." Her words hung in the air, the silence that followed almost unbearable. She waited, holding her breath, unsure of what would happen next. Would they reject her? Would they see her as weak, as unfit to lead? But as the seconds stretched on, something unexpected happened. A soft murmur rose from the ranks, and then, slowly, one by one, her soldiers lowered their heads, not in submission, but in understanding. They had seen the change in her, the shift from perfection to something more real. And in that, they saw strength. The human soldier, who had stood by her side through it all, stepped forward, his face a mixture of pride and respect. "You're not just a queen," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the quiet battlefield. "You're a leader." The queen felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. But it was not the heat of pride. It was the warmth of something far deeper, of belonging. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She wasn't isolated in her role. She was a part of something larger, something that didn't require perfection to thrive. It required honesty, vulnerability, and strength. And that was something she could give, something she could offer with no fear of failure. With a deep breath, she took a step forward, her eyes meeting those of her soldiers. "We move forward," she said, her voice firm once more, but this time with a gentleness that was new. "Not as a queen and her subjects, but as a people united, real, and strong in our truth." And with that, the Queen, the woman, took her first true step into the future. The crown she wore no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a choice, a part of who she was, not what defined her. The soldiers who followed her were not there to worship her image, but to walk beside her, as equals, in a journey that would be shaped not by power or perfection, but by the strength of their shared humanity. As they began to march forward, the wind seemed to echo their resolve, a soft, steady reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies in embracing the truth and letting go of the fear of what comes next.